From the world of AV programming and control with James King, I'm Steve Greenblatt, and this is Ask the Programmer. Hey, James, it's good to be back with you. How are you today?
I'm doing great, Steve. And how are you doing?
I'm doing well. Glad to be back and have another episode where we could chat and answer a question from our audience. And if you didn't catch our past episode, we were talking about what advice would you give somebody who is looking to get into AV programming? That question came from Cece Porter from Pace University, and she asked another one. So we're going to tackle that one today. So CCS, how do you explain technical concepts in programming to people who are non-technical? And I think it's a good question, and it does relate to our previous uh, topic in terms of how do you get into programming because they are kind of tied together. But do you have thoughts that you want to get us started with?
Sure. So I agree. This was a great question. So thank you, CC. But yeah, way I tackle this question is explain technical concept in program is kind of how you would explain technical concept in anything, not just programming, to a non-technical person. You what you want to try to do is putting in terms they'll understand. Stay away from the jargon. Um, there's a lot of jargon, especially in programming and IT and AV. There's tons of jargon, tons of acronyms, or we love our acronyms, or HMI, DHCP, and all that stuff, and syntax for programming and things like that. So or IDEs. So try to stay away from those jargons and have the conversation like you would talking to your 80-year-old grandmother. Try to put it in terms that they would understand.
Yeah, I like that a lot, actually. I think you're right that we do tend to talk in terms that people don't grasp, and a lot of times people aren't willing to tell you what they don't understand, so they just nod their head and they seem like they're going along with you, but in the end, if you ask a follow up, they probably are not able to follow, or they'll probably admit then that they really didn't understand what you were talking about. Um, it, I think that this is a good question to ask because I think it's important because it's the same thing about how do you explain that you're in the AV industry to somebody. It's not easy. Yeah, I think that's always a tricky question. And when you ask somebody what does the AV industry mean to them, they don't necessarily know the best way of answering that, or you might get very off the wall answers. But the way I probably would approach how to explain programming is that it's the instructions that you are writing to take some type of a input, whether it's a button press or an action, and and then create an outcome is really, to me, I think a high level description of programming. There's a lot more that goes into it, but it's really being able to write those instructions. And similar to what we said in the past, if you can write down on paper what you want something to do, programming it is not really that far off from there. It's just about learning a different way of being able to write in a language, so instead of writing it in English, you're writing it in a computer language. So I think that's a lot of what programming is, but I think a lot of times we think of programming as being able to read somebody's mind, and it can't. The computer can only do what you tell it to do, and you have to explain all the scenarios because it's not going to be able to fill in the blanks. So it doesn't think for itself. It can only work with what you tell it. So you need to really write out all of the cases that you are trying to cover. So, for example, if you are trying to turn on a device only if it was previously off, you have to tell it that. You can't, so you have to say if off then turn on. You can't just say turn it on. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of different di different. You have to be kind of longhand in some regard.
Yeah, and now that I'm kind of like really trying to digest this question and put it in terms, I kind of think of programming as your ingredients for a bakery, cake or whatever. You, that's what the programming is. It's in the ingredients, it's in instructions, and your hope is at the end you have your cake. Nope, your customers who are eating your cake, they don't know what ingredients are going into it. They don't know how you put it together. They don't know all that stuff. They just know they eat the cake. And also, like if you're baking a cake, if you divert, like I say, if it's supposed to be 4 cups of flour and you put 1 cup of flour in, the cake's not going to turn out well. So you have, like Steve was saying, you have to be precise. One of the best examples I ever saw about being precise is a video of the father and a child, and the father asks the child, "Teach me how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich." Have you seen that one, Steve?
I haven't.
Oh, it's pretty good because but kind of, I mean, there's a lot of variables to it. But the first one is the son's like, "Oh, you put peanut butter on the bread." So the father takes a jar of peanut butter and puts it on a slice of bread. And he's like, "No, no, no. I mean, you got to open the jar." Well, so that's what about being clear and concise in your program. Like you said, is you can't just say turn on. The system's already on. It's like why? Like you can't just do that. You have to do those longhand. You have to be precise.
I like that a lot, actually. I'm going to use that because
Yeah.
that's a great example of what programming is the instructions to making a peanut butter sandwich. I like that a lot.
Yeah, I'll see if I can find that video. I'll send it and maybe we can link it in the show.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great, a great description of programming. If I like that, and I think that that would hopefully hit home with people. Um, because it really does require being detailed, being precise, and in AV in particular too, you have to know what you're working with, because you also have to know the different limitations that you have. You have to know what is a device capable of doing, and that also goes into making programming successful. So it a programmer a lot of times, and I know we're kind of getting a little straying a little bit away from the question, but for Cece's sake, the programmer really needs to understand a little bit about all the aspects of a system, because they are the ones that tie it all together. And really, what programming does is it talks to each of the products and knows how to speak in its own language. What is the command for each particular device, which will vary based on a device. And then you also need to understand timing. You have to understand the and how to guide a user so that the user doesn't get themselves in trouble. That's another aspect of I think those listening who are experienced programmers should be nodding their head when you talk about the fast fingered user when they're trying to press a million buttons, and you have to make sure that the program doesn't cause the system to lock up, and all of those things go into being a successful programmer, and making the a program creating a program that is foolproof, if you will, and reliable.
Yeah, no, 100%. Couldn't agree more with that and couldn't really add any more to that. That's a great one, Steve.
Um, so this, another great question from CC, and if anyone out in our audience would like to help, I'd be curious to know if you have more examples that you could share, like James has, and we're going to link the YouTube video to this episode. But these are all good ways that we can help build community and familiarity, and help to educate those in our audience that are looking to learn more about programming or trying to use this podcast as a way of explaining programming to other people. So please keep those questions coming. James, how can people get in touch with you? How can they send questions or continue this conversation?
Oh, again, Google me. You'll find me on X as AB_James King, Sunday morning at AB in the AM. LinkedIn, I'm on there as well. Anything with HEPMA, again, you can find me out there.
And for me, you can reach me at Steve Greenblatt on social media. You can reach my company, Control Concepts, at controlconcepts.net. Please reach out and let us know what you think. We'd like to continue to field more questions. We'd like to have more guests on. All that's possible if you reach out to us and let us know you're out there. You can find this podcast in the video form on YouTube, the audio form in your favorite podcast player. And please leave us a rating or review and all those things. And we would really very much appreciate it. And until next time, this has been Ask the Programmer.